I didn't say a word when they handed me the eviction notice. The paper trembled in my hand, but not from fear, from fury. 35 homes now stood on land that had belonged to my family for nearly 70 years. To them, it was just another development project. To me, it was Pop's legacy. The soil where I learned to ride a horse, shoot a rifle, and watch the Texas sun melt into the horizon. The sheriff's deputy avoided my eyes, muttering about how the paperwork looked official. Behind him, a construction crew laughed while pouring concrete into yet another foundation. My land, my water, my history sold off like it was worthless dirt. But here's what they didn't know. This farm wasn't just rolling hills and pasture. Hidden on the back 40 was a dam. Not some backyard pond, but a Real Army Corps approved earth dam built by Pops himself in 1978. Most people never noticed it because Pops had designed it to blend into the land. Just a ridge of earth, a quiet spillway, a shimmering pool of water that reflected the sky. To our neighbors, it was a lifeline during dry seasons. To me, it was a time bomb, waiting for someone arrogant enough to build downstream. I slid a photocopy of the 1923 water rights deed across the table. The HOA rep glanced at it, confused. That paper was older than every single house in Willowbrook Estates. Older than the HOA itself. Older than the city's own water system. They wanted to fight me in court? Fine. But water law doesn't care about gated communities or city council connections. Water law cares about senior rights, and Pops had secured them nearly a century ago. As the construction trucks rumbled across my land, I looked past them toward the dam. The water shimmered in the Texas sun, calm for now. But deep inside, I knew one day those gates would open. And when they did, the truth would flow with them. My grandfather, Pops, bought this land in 1955. Back then, Austin was a sleepy college town where barbecue joints outnumbered tech companies 1,000 to 1. He was the kind of man who believed in taking care of the land and the people around him. In '78, Pops built the dam. Nothing fancy, just good engineering and a lot of sweat. The Army Corps of Engineers even advised on the design. His purpose wasn't profit. It was survival. The dam collected rainwater for cattle, provided irrigation for crops, and, most importantly, gave downstream neighbors water during droughts. Pops used to say, "Water is life, Jake. Protect it, and it'll protect you." I was 10 when he first let me open the spillway gates. I'll never forget the rush of water surging down, the smell of wet earth, the way neighbors cheered when their fields came back to life. To Pops, the dam wasn't just dirt and concrete. It was community. But when I went off to serve 2 tours in Afghanistan, Pops passed away. The property fell into a trust managed by my sister Sarah out in California. She meant well, but she knew as much about Texas land law as I knew about surfing. She hired a management company, paid the taxes automatically, and assumed all was well. That mistake nearly cost us everything. While I was overseas, a woman named Margaret Maggie Thornwell, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, saw an opportunity. She was the kind of person who smiled sweetly while stabbing you in the back. Married to a city councilman, dressed in tennis skirts like they were business suits, Maggie oozed entitlement. She filed an adverse possession claim on the back 40, basically saying that since nobody was actively using the land, the HOA had the right to improve it. Then her husband fast-tracked a zoning change, flipping my family's property from agricultural to residential development. By the time I came home in 2023, 35 homes were already halfway built. When I confronted the foreman, he shrugged. "We got permits. This is HOA property now." That's when Maggie herself rolled up in a golf cart, sipping iced tea like some kind of suburban warlord. She smiled and said, "Your family abandoned this land, honey. We're just putting it to good use for the community." Her construction crews had already diverted the creek that fed Pop's dam. The water level was dropping every day. 45 years of careful management was being drained for decorative fountains and fake waterfalls. As she drove away, she tossed one last insult over her shoulder. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about land. This was war. At first, I made the mistake of hiring a lawyer. $85,000 just to challenge the zoning. He told me my chances were slim. So instead, I went digging. County records, Army Corps files, dusty courthouse archives. And that's when I struck gold. I found Pop's original dam permits, signed in 1978. That dam wasn't just a pond. It was federally approved flood control infrastructure, which meant one thing: federal jurisdiction. Local HOAs couldn't override it. But that wasn't all. Buried deeper, I uncovered a deed from 1923, my great-grandfather's purchase of senior water rights to Willow Creek. These rights were older than the city, older than the county. In Texas, water rights aren't just property, they're power. And legally, they belong to me. The HOA wasn't just trespassing. They were stealing federally protected water. Maggie wasn't stupid. She knew she was in trouble. So she flipped the narrative. On the evening news, she stood in front of the subdivision, clutching tissues and warning about that dangerous dam. She cried about children's safety and unstable veterans. Online, she painted me as a threat. On Nextdoor, she hinted about aggressive individuals without naming me. The community didn't need names, they knew. Meanwhile, her husband used city connections to unleash a wave of inspectors on me. Building codes, health department, animal control. Every visit came with citations and fees. They wanted to bury me in paperwork until I gave up. But I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I found others who'd suffered under Maggie. Mrs. Chen, whose garden had withered since the creek was diverted. Miguel Santos, whose family farm lost water years earlier. Together, we formed a coalition. An environmental lawyer named Amanda joined pro bono. My old Army buddy Tony Riggs, now with the EPA, coached me on environmental law. Piece by piece, we built a case. But more importantly, we built a plan. This wasn't going to be won in court alone. It had to be engineering. I studied Pop's journals, recalculated water flow, serviced the old hydraulic gates. With Tony's guidance, I documented everything: flow meters, time-stamped photos, drone footage. The storm season was coming. Heavy rains were predicted. If I opened the spillway at the right moment, I could restore Willow Creek to its natural path. No homes would be destroyed, but Maggie's concrete barriers and fraudulent diversion would be exposed. Amanda called it risky. I called it necessary. September rains rolled in. Storm clouds bruised the Texas sky. Maggie organized her safety patrol. Neighbors with folding chairs, cameras ready to livestream me as the villain. She even staged a photo op. Mothers clutching children at the property line, demanding the city stop me. But at dawn, federal agents arrived. Thanks to Tony, the EPA had opened an investigation. They came to witness. At 7:02 a.m., I placed my hand on Pop's old lever. His words echoed in my head. "Water is life, Jake. Protect it, and it'll protect you." I opened the gates. The sound was magnificent. Not destruction, but restoration. Water surged down the original creek bed, carving its way home. Mrs. Chun wept as her garden irrigation filled for the first time in months. Miguel knelt and let the water run through his hands, whispering, "This is the water that fed my grandfather's farm." Meanwhile, Maggie screamed at the federal agents, "He's flooding our children's homes." But no homes were flooded. Not one. The water flowed exactly where it always had, before her HOA stole it. On live TV, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the villain. She was. In court, Maggie's lawyers claimed millions in damages. They called me unstable, accused me of using military tactics to terrorize families. Amanda responded with Pop's covenant, the legal obligation to maintain seasonal flow. Tony testified the spillway matched historical patterns. Federal agents confirmed the HOA's creek diversion violated multiple laws. Then came the knockout punch. Rick Thornwell's own voice on a recorded call, bragging about destroying property values and fast-tracking zoning for profit. The judge had no choice. The HOA lost everything. Rick faced federal charges. Maggie fled the courthouse without comment. Months later, justice flowed as naturally as the restored creek. Rick went to prison. Maggie declared bankruptcy. The HOA dissolved. My land was restored, my water rights protected. But the real victory wasn't mine. It was the communities. Mrs. Chen's garden bloomed again. Miguel's farm thrived. Wildlife returned to the creek. Pop's Dam became a case study in environmental restoration. Every Sunday, I bring a mason jar of creek water to Pop's grave. I set it down and whisper, "The creek's singing again, Pops, just like you said it would." Sometimes, to save a legacy, you don't fight with fists or lawyers. You fight with water. And when you open the gates at the right moment, truth flows free.